The screen flickered, then froze. For a second, I thought it was just another late-night glitch. But the cursor moved, by itself. I leaned forward, every nerve on alert. The final name pulsed on my monitor. I hadn't touched it, and yet the document opened, slide by slide, as if some invisible hand was leafing through my work. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was inside my system, and I already knew who. Evan Keene, the CEO's son, the golden boy with an MBA and a God complex, the one who thought NorthBridge Tech was his personal playground. I watched as he scrolled through my proposal, the one I'd spent months building, the contract that would either elevate the company to national recognition or sink us if handled wrong. My presentation, my data, my everything. I minimized the window and opened the security log. Unauthorized access from an executive device. The same one I'd flagged last week. The same one Evan bragged about getting early. My pulse pounded. He hadn't even tried to hide it. For the past few weeks, I'd been noticing signs. Tiny, calculated breaches. A file modified at midnight. Comments appearing in drafts I hadn't shared. Password resets that never stuck. And every time I'd convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. But this was proof. I slammed my laptop shut, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the hum of the office lights. It was past 11, the entire building asleep, except for the cleaning crew 2 floors down. Outside, Manhattan glittered like a city of secrets. Inside, I was holding one of my own, one that could destroy careers. By the time I called Leo from InfoSec, my hands were shaking. "Someone's in my files again," I whispered. He exhaled through the line. "Same device as before?" "Executive floor." "Then it's Evan. I told you he's reckless, Maya." I could hear him typing, pulling up the server logs. "He's downloading your proposal, full package, financial models, client timelines, everything." I sank into my chair, pressing a hand over my mouth. "He's stealing my work." "Not stealing," Leo said grimly. "Copying. That's worse. It means he's planning to use it." A cold, focused calm spread through me, the kind that comes only after the shock fades. He was going to take credit for the summit proposal, the same one I'd been leading for 9 months. And Jonathan, his father, the CEO, would believe him, because in Jonathan's eyes, Evan could do no wrong. But that night, watching the cursor move across my stolen slides, I decided on something I hadn't planned in my entire career. If Evan wanted my files, I'd let him have them. Only they wouldn't be real. The next day, I showed up early. Too early. My reflection in the glass doors looked calm, almost serene, but inside, I was calculating. I made coffee, answered emails, nodded at people I barely saw, all while creating a mirrored set of documents, identical in appearance, perfectly formatted, but poisoned with subtle flaws. Financial models with inflated returns, deployment schedules that couldn't be met, technical specs that sounded brilliant but would implode in testing. Everything looked professional until someone with actual experience tried to defend it in front of a room full of experts. A honeypot. My trap. By mid-afternoon, Leo stopped by my desk with the flash drive. "You sure about this?" I nodded. "He's going to take the bait anyway. I'm just controlling where it leads." He hesitated. "If this blows back, HR's going to call it entrapment. Then I'll hand them the access logs. Every single one." I replaced the original files in the shared drive with my doctored versions and encrypted the real proposal in a hidden folder. It felt dangerous, exhilarating, wrong, but also right. For months, I'd been the one covering for Evan's mistakes, fixing his half-baked ideas before they embarrassed the company. This time, I wasn't going to clean up after him. I was going to let the mess burn. That night, I waited. 11:10 p.m. A ping. 11:12 p.m. Unauthorized access detected. 11:14 p.m. File download initiated. My throat went dry. He took the bait. I could almost picture him at home, probably in that overpriced loft his father paid for, sipping whiskey and smirking at his work, thinking he'd outsmarted me. Let him enjoy it. Tomorrow was the summit presentation, and the moment he started defending those fake numbers in front of the board and our clients, the floor beneath him would collapse. Still, when I finally shut my laptop, the adrenaline faded into something darker. Fear. What if Jonathan blamed me? What if this backfired? What if Evan twisted it first? I walked to the window and looked down at the city lights bleeding into the river. Somewhere out there, my stolen work was being paraded as someone else's genius. But by this time tomorrow, everyone would know the truth. I just had to keep my composure until then. Because once the lights dimmed in that conference room and the slides started rolling, it wouldn't just be Evan's reputation on the line. It would be mine. And I wasn't about to lose. The boardroom smelled like espresso and ambition. Every seat was filled. Executives, analysts, the Summit Dynamics delegation, even Jonathan Keene himself, seated at the head of the table like a judge waiting for the verdict. My palms were slick. I'd been through dozens of presentations before, but this one felt different. The tension wasn't about the client, it was about him, Evan. He stood at the front of the room in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, confident, composed, rehearsed, a man ready to bask in stolen light. When Jonathan announced, "My son will be leading today's proposal," the room gave a polite round of applause. I smiled on cue, though every muscle in my body screamed. The lights dimmed. The first slide flashed onto the projector. It was my deck, my fonts, my formatting, even my small notes in the corner, the ones I left to remind myself of transitions. Evan hadn't changed a thing, not even the title slide. I felt a dark satisfaction stir in my chest. He began talking, smoothly at first, weaving buzzwords like synergy and data-driven pivot into the air. He was good at this part, sounding like he knew what he was doing. His voice carried that arrogant lilt, the tone of someone who'd never been told no in his life. But then 20 minutes in, he advanced to the financial slide, the one with the poisoned data. He said the projected ROI for year 2 is expected to exceed 148%. A sharp intake of breath from across the table. Valerie Cho leaned forward. "Excuse me, what did you say?" Evan froze for half a second, then repeated it slower, like she hadn't heard him right. 148%. The silence stretched. Valerie flipped through her printout, frowning. "You're suggesting near tripled return margins in 24 months on a deployment this size? That's mathematically impossible." He blinked. "Well, that's what our analytics calculated." Jonathan's eyes darted toward me. My heart thudded once, hard. I stayed perfectly still, neutral, professional. "Valerie didn't buy it. Can you walk me through your methodology, specifically how you're reconciling server maintenance costs with the projected churn reduction?" Evan's composure cracked. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He clicked to the next slide too fast, skipping half the section. We used a comparative model." "What model?" Valerie pressed. He looked lost now, the confidence melting from his face like wax under a lamp. I almost felt bad. Almost. Jonathan cleared his throat. "Evan, maybe Maya can speak to that part." My cue. Every eye turned to me. I rose slowly, forcing my hands not to tremble. "Of course," I said, with the calm of someone who'd been waiting all week for this moment. I walked to the front of the room, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. The light caught the edge of my blazer as I took the clicker from Evan's frozen hand. "Let me clarify," I said. "The version you're seeing now was a preliminary draft, created to test different financial models before final validation. The actual projection, after verification, is closer to 43% ROI in the first 2 years, scaling to 65% by year 4. Valerie nodded slowly, relief visible in her shoulders. "That's far more realistic." Jonathan's brow furrowed. "Preliminary draft," he repeated. His tone was icy. "Yes," I said. "The secured version of the proposal was finalized last night. Only a few people had access to it. Unfortunately, someone seems to have used an older version by mistake." The word "someone" landed like a grenade. Evan's face turned pale. "That's not," he started, but Jonathan cut him off. "Evan, where did you get this file?" Dad, I downloaded it from the shared drive last night." "The drive Maya told everyone not to touch after midnight?" Evan swallowed hard. The silence that followed was merciless. You could hear the hum of the projector. Valerie folded her hands, watching him the way a cat watches a trapped mouse. "I'd recommend verifying internal access policies," she said diplomatically. "Client data integrity is paramount." Jonathan nodded stiffly. "It will be handled." Then, turning to me, "Maya, would you mind continuing with the correct version?" "Of course," I said, switching to my encrypted drive. The next 20 minutes went smoothly. The real numbers, the real plan, the one my team had perfected, it sang. The summit board was impressed. The energy shifted back in our favor, and by the time I concluded, they were nodding, satisfied. As they filed out for lunch, Valerie caught my arm. "Good save," she murmured. Not everyone would have handled that so gracefully. Thank you, I said, managing a small smile. We believe in accuracy here. She winked. So I see. When the door shut behind the clients, the air in the room changed. The applause was gone. The tension remained. Jonathan stood by the projector, arms crossed. Evan hovered near the wall, his phone clutched like a lifeline. Maya, Jonathan said, a word. I followed him into his office, the door closing with a soft but final click. He didn't sit. He just looked at me, long, calculating. You set him up. I met his gaze evenly. I protected my work. His jaw tightened. You could have come to me. With all due respect, sir, I did, indirectly. I told you weeks ago about unauthorized access. You said it was a technical glitch. Silence. He turned away, looking out the window at the skyline. This could have destroyed the company. I stepped forward, or saved it. Summit would have caught the errors. You would have lost the contract and NorthBridge's reputation along with it. You're welcome. He exhaled slowly. Evan's your superior. I can't have public embarrassment like this. I smiled faintly. Then maybe he should stop stealing from his subordinates. He turned back to me, anger flickering behind his eyes, but not denial, just the kind of fury born from realization. Finally, he said, Go home, Maya. I'll deal with this. I nodded, gathering my things. As I stepped out of the office, Evan was waiting in the hall, eyes blazing. You think this is over? He hissed. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I leaned in just enough to let him see the calm in my eyes. No, Evan, I said softly. You did that all by yourself. Then I walked away, leaving him standing there, red-faced and trembling. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that Evan wasn't done. He still had access to one account I'd forgotten to secure, and by tomorrow morning, he'd find a new way to make me pay. By the next morning, the building felt colder. Maybe it was just me, or maybe NorthBridge had absorbed the tension radiating from the executive floor. Either way, the air was sharp enough to cut through. I walked into the office to find people whispering in low tones. Conversations stopped when I passed. Screens dimmed. Slack channels that used to buzz were suddenly quiet. Something was wrong. When I reached my desk, I saw the email. Subject: urgent, confidential data breach investigation. And it was about me. A preliminary review has identified irregular file sharing activity originating from Maya Torres' credentials. An internal inquiry is being initiated pending further verification. My throat went dry. I scrolled further. Attached was a screenshot of a shared drive showing my username accessing files at 1 a.m., including one labeled foo. Only one problem. I hadn't logged in since 11:30 p.m. the night before. Someone had forged my trail. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. I knew exactly who could have done it. Evan. He still had admin-level access through the executive security group, and I hadn't revoked his temporary permissions after the summit fiasco. One oversight. One. And he'd found it. I took a breath, forcing my heartbeat to slow. This was exactly what he wanted. Panic. I opened my chat window and messaged Leo. I messaged Leo the moment I saw the email. My fingers could barely keep up with my heartbeat. I'm being set up. His reply came almost instantly. Saw the email. You didn't trigger it. We checked your IPs. They're clean. I stared at the screen, pulse thudding in my ears. Clean didn't make sense. If I hadn't done it, someone had. Then how'd he do it? I typed. The typing bubble flickered for a few seconds before his response appeared. Someone used your credential token remotely. Could be a cloned session. A cloned session. My stomach dropped. That meant whoever did this hadn't just guessed my password. They duplicated my digital fingerprint, my secure login identity. I told compliance already, Leah wrote, but they're under pressure from Jonathan. He wants it handled quietly. Quietly. The word tasted bitter. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside, pacing near the glass elevator bank. My reflection looked like a stranger. Same dark hair, same pressed blazer, but the eyes belonged to someone cornered. Within an hour, HR called me in. The director, a soft-voiced woman named Marcy, greeted me with the kind of sympathy reserved for people already assumed guilty. Maya, she began carefully, there's been a serious concern raised about unauthorized data access. We just need to get your statement. I met her gaze. My credentials were cloned. Check the metadata. She smiled tightly. Of course, but until we complete the audit, we'll need to restrict your system access temporarily. There it was, the polite corporate version of being benched. When I walked back to my desk, my monitor was already locked. Access revoked. The whispers got louder. People stared but didn't speak. The same colleagues who'd congratulated me yesterday now avoided eye contact. That's how quickly it happens. One rumor, one email, and your reputation starts bleeding out. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the reflection of my own frozen login screen. Then I decided to stop waiting. That afternoon, I went to see Diane, my lawyer, and lately, my therapist by necessity. Her office overlooked the park, bright and calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos inside my head. He's retaliating, I said, pacing. He used my credentials and planted evidence. She listened, tapping her pen against the pad. You have proof. Leo's logs, access timestamps, IP mismatches, session fingerprints, everything. But Jonathan is too deep in denial to see it. She leaned back. Then don't go through Jonathan. Go higher. I frowned. You mean the board? She nodded. The compliance committee reports directly to them. If you can tie Evan's actions to a breach of fiduciary duty, they'll have to act. But you'll need hard evidence, screenshots, server logs, an internal witness. Leo. I left Diane's office with a plan forming in the back of my head. It wasn't elegant, but it was necessary. If Evan wanted to play dirty, I'd match him. Only smarter. By nightfall, the office was mostly empty again. I used my visitor badge to slip back into the InfoSec floor. Leo met me by the server rack room, his hoodie pulled low, eyes darting toward the cameras. You're lucky I like you, he muttered, handing me a flash drive. This has every log from last night. Your account wasn't the one that accessed those files. It was his session ID spoofed under yours. If they dig even a little, it's obvious. Thank you, I whispered. I owe you. He smirked. Yeah, you do. Coffee for a month. I smiled for the first time that day. But as I turned to leave, Leo stopped me. There's something else, he said, voice low. Evan accessed more than your files. He's been downloading internal audit reports, vendor contracts, sensitive stuff. Looks like he's trying to pin a narrative that you've been mishandling data for months. A chill ran through me. Why? He shrugged. If he gets ahead of the story, he controls it. Classic misdirection. I clenched the flash drive in my hand. Not this time. The next morning, I sent an anonymous email to the compliance board with the subject line, Evidence of Unauthorized Access, NorthBridge Executive Involvement. Attached, Leo's logs, timestamp records, and an excerpt showing Evan's device fingerprint linked to multiple cloned sessions. I wrote no signature, no plea, just the facts. By noon, the building was buzzing again. Only this time, the whispers weren't about me. Rumors spread that the board had launched an independent investigation. The IT security director was called into a closed meeting. Jonathan canceled his afternoon calls. Evan's office door stayed shut. For the first time in days, I could breathe. But peace never lasts long in corporate warfare. At 3 p.m., a notification popped up on my personal phone, one I hadn't used for work in years. Unknown number. Nice move, Maya. Let's see how long your halo lasts once the board reads what I've got. My blood went cold. Attached was a single PDF file named confidentialclientlist.pdf, my name stamped across the metadata. It was forged, obviously, but to anyone who didn't know better, it looked like I'd leaked client information outside the company. He was escalating. And he wasn't just trying to destroy my career now. He wanted to bury me completely. That night, as I stood in my apartment staring at the Manhattan skyline, I realized the game had shifted. Evan wasn't just reckless, he was desperate. Cornered animals lash out. But I wasn't running anymore. I'd fought too hard to get here, to build something that couldn't be stolen, twisted, or erased. And if I had to expose the rot at the top of NorthBridge Tech to do it, so be it. Tomorrow, I'd make my next move. And this time, it wouldn't just be Evan on the line. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that forged PDF, my name stamped under confidential leak. It wasn't just a file. It was a threat, a promise that Evan wasn't done yet. But neither was I. By sunrise, I had a plan. I wasn't going to leak anything or play his game. I was going to use the system he thought protected him. corporate compliance, ethics board, whistleblower laws, the boring backbone of the empire he treated like his playground. And I knew how to make that machine work for me. The next morning, I walked into NorthBridge Tech like nothing had happened. Head high, calm smile, the practiced mask of a woman who refuses to be broken. The whispers were louder now. Someone had definitely spread the Maya leaked files rumor. HR glanced up as I passed. Too quickly, too guilty. Perfect. I went straight to the internal ethics liaison, a man named Raphael Lin, who'd been quietly documenting executive misconduct for years. I knew because I'd helped him once, when a senior partner tried to bury a harassment complaint. "Good morning, Raphael," I said softly, closing the glass door behind me. He looked up from his screen. "Maya, you picked a hell of a day." "I always do." I slid a small folder across his desk. Evidence, full server logs, device fingerprints, and the email trail proving credential spoofing. It shows that Evan Keene accessed restricted data under my name. He frowned, flipping through the pages. "You're bringing this to me instead of compliance?" I said, "They're compromised. Jonathan's trying to handle it quietly. I'm not interested in quiet." Raphael's eyes sharpened. "You want this escalated." "I want it documented, formally, irrevocably. If this company has integrity left, it starts here." He nodded slowly. "You know, once this is logged, there's no walking it back. They'll open a full audit, including executive behavior." "That's the point." He looked at me for a long moment, then hit enter. A soft tone confirmed it. Report submitted. I exhaled, shaky but determined. The fuse had been lit, not by gossip, not by revenge, but by protocol. Within 2 hours, the board convened an emergency session. Word spread fast. By noon, an independent legal firm had been called in to handle the investigation. Phones buzzed, Slack threads went silent. From my desk, I watched the walls of power start to tremble. Evan didn't come into work that morning. His assistant claimed he was working remotely. Jonathan's office door stayed closed. Every time it opened, executives came out with pale faces and urgent phone calls. Leo messaged me. "They're digging into the audit logs. The external investigators asked for your copies." I replied, "They have them." Leo said, "Good, this might actually stick." It was happening. The machine was grinding into motion, slow but unstoppable. That evening I was called into the boardroom, not by HR, not by Jonathan, but by the independent counsel. A middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a colder voice introduced herself. "I'm attorney Catherine Myers. We're conducting a neutral investigation into potential breaches of data ethics and access misuse. You've been named as both a complainant and a respondent. We need to clarify your position." I nodded. "I'm happy to cooperate." She motioned for me to sit. "Did you knowingly share confidential files with external parties?" "No." "Did you fabricate evidence against an executive?" I met her gaze. "No, but one did fabricate evidence against me." Then I laid it out, calmly, professionally, with every supporting log. No drama, no emotion, just truth. The kind that cuts sharper than rumor. When she finished, she sat back, eyes narrowed. "If what you're saying checks out, this goes far beyond a personal dispute." I said quietly, "It does. It's about accountability." The next morning, the company was in controlled chaos. The internal memo hit every inbox at 8:02 a.m. Effective immediately, NorthBridge Technologies will undergo a full security and compliance review conducted by external auditors. Pending investigation, Mr. Evan Keene has been placed on administrative leave. People read it twice, then 3 times. You could almost feel the collective exhale. My notifications exploded, messages of cautious support, half apologies from people who doubted me. Even Valerie from Summit Dynamics emailed. "Glad to see the truth win sometimes. We still want to move forward with the partnership, with you leading the project." I stared at that last line for a long time. The irony hit hard. The contract Evan tried to steal was now mine, officially. But victory didn't feel clean. It never does when the battlefield is littered with professional reputations. Later that afternoon, I was called back into Jonathan's office. He was standing by the window again, his silhouette framed against the skyline. "You made your point," he said without turning around. I said it wasn't about making a point, it was about the truth. He finally looked at me. The arrogance that usually lived behind his eyes was gone, replaced by something older, heavier. "You went around me." I said, "You gave me no choice." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You know what this does to my family. I know what his actions almost did to my career." We stood in silence. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, Summit confirmed they'll proceed with you as project lead. I nodded once. Thank you. As I turned to leave, he added quietly, Maya, don't mistake survival for victory. This company doesn't forget. I paused at the door. Neither do I. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city stretched below me in 1,000 restless lights. The investigation wasn't over. Evan would fight, lawyers would circle, the gossip would twist again. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I hadn't hacked, leaked, or lied. I just refused to be erased. And maybe that's what real power looks like. Not revenge, but resilience. Tomorrow I'd walk back into NorthBridge not as someone who survived the fire, but the one who walked through it and made sure the match went out. 3 weeks later, NorthBridge Tech didn't feel like the same company. The hallways were quieter, the smiles tighter. Every department was under audit, every password reset, every executive suddenly terrified of their own inbox. The walls hummed with unspoken awareness. The rules had changed. Evan was gone. Officially, he was on indefinite leave pending review. Unofficially, the board had forced him out. I knew because Raphael told me. The external investigators had traced every false login, every forged file, every whisper of tampering straight to his laptop. He tried to delete everything, of course, but Leo's logs were airtight. Even white drives tell stories if you know how to listen. The investigators found metadata linking his forged PDF, the one that framed me, to a cloud account registered under his personal email. The timestamps matched the exact hour he texted me that taunting message. It was over. But if I'd learned anything from corporate warfare, it's that no one ever announces defeat. They just vanish behind polished statements and quiet resignations. When the internal memo came through, it was short and bloodless. Effective immediately, Mr. Evan Keene will no longer be employed by NorthBridge Technologies. We thank him for his contributions and wish him success in future endeavors. No apology, no admission, just erasure. The same tool he'd tried to use on me. But I didn't need his humiliation. I just needed my name cleared. Jonathan, though, was a different story. He hadn't spoken to me since that last confrontation in his office. Some part of me thought he'd call me in, maybe offer an apology, or at least a thank you for saving the company's biggest contract. But weeks passed and nothing. Until one morning, a message appeared in my inbox. Subject, Project Transition Meeting, 2 p.m. It was from him. When I walked into his office, the first thing I noticed was the half-packed boxes, framed awards, old photos, a single orchid on the windowsill. You're leaving, I said quietly. He nodded, still facing the skyline. The board asked me to step down after the audit, said they want a fresh culture. He gave a bitter smile. That's code for damage control. I didn't gloat. I couldn't. He looked smaller, human for once. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. He turned to me then, eyes tired. You were right, Maya. I should have listened. I let my son's ambition blind me. I hesitated. Evan made his own choices. Yes, he said, but I built the walls that let him hide. Silence stretched between us, heavy, but not hostile. Then he handed me a folder. The board voted unanimously. You're being promoted to Director of Strategic Accounts. Effective immediately. For a second, I couldn't breathe. You're serious? I am. You earned it. He paused. And if you want my advice, don't become like us. Don't build something you're too proud to see clearly. He offered his hand. I shook it. And just like that, the era of Jonathan Keene ended. The following week, Summit Dynamics officially signed the 4-year contract. The win was public this time. Press release, LinkedIn buzz, interviews. And for once, my name was on it. Still, the victory felt strange. Not hollow exactly, but complicated. I'd fought so hard just to keep what was already mine. And now that I had it, I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in the same place that had almost destroyed me. Raphael stopped by my new office a few days later, 2 coffees in hand. "Director Torres," he teased, setting one on my desk. "Got a nice ring to it." I smiled faintly. Feels weird, like I borrowed someone else's title. He leaned against the doorframe. "You didn't borrow it. You survived for it. That's rarer than you think." "Still," I said, looking around the glass walls, "I keep wondering how many other stories never make it past the whisper stage." Raphael's eyes softened. "Then maybe you're the one who changes that." He was halfway down the hall when he added, "Oh, board wants you to join the new ethics committee. You up for it?" I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." That night, I walked home instead of taking a cab. The city buzzed the way it always does, impatient, relentless, alive. I passed the same corner cafe where I'd once sat panicking over fake files and stolen passwords. It felt like a lifetime ago. I bought a coffee, sat by the window, and watched the reflection of passing faces. People chasing deadlines, promises, illusions of control. For the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. No alerts, no threats, just peace. When I finally opened my laptop, it wasn't to check work or metrics. It was to draft something else entirely. A resignation letter. Not out of defeat, but out of freedom. Because I realized something as the city lights blurred across the glass. I didn't survive NorthBridge to keep climbing its walls. I survived so I could build something better outside them. I hit save, but didn't send it yet. Not tomorrow. Maybe after the summit rollout. For now, I just wanted to sit there, in the quiet, the calm after the storm, and know that I'd told the truth, played fair, and still won. Not with revenge, with resolution. And in a world like this, that's the rarest victory of all.